So what is Bloom's taxonomy and why would someone come up with it? Well, in 1956, a man by the name of Benjamin Bloom, along with a group of educational psychologists, developed a classification of intellectual behavior levels that are important in learning, which consisted of 6 major categories that you can see on page 1 of the handout that was given to you, listed as the old version. Notice that this is arranged in a pyramid style, which suggests that each level builds upon the other because you cannot understand a concept if you do not first remember it. Similarly, you cannot apply knowledge and concepts if you do not understand them. It is a scale from lower order thinking skills to higher order thinking skills, in which Bloom describes each category as a gerund. They are arranged in increasing order from lower order to higher order. The first level is knowledge. This is what a student can recall or recognize as information, ideas, and principles in the approximate form in which they were learned. An example would be a student defining the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy of the conjugative domain. The second level is comprehension. This is where a student can translate, comprehend, or interpret information based on prior learning. An example would be that the student explains the purpose of Bloom's taxonomy of the conjugative domain, or basically what I'm doing now. The third level is application. This is where a student selects, transfers, and uses data and principles to complete a problem or task with a minimum of direction. An example of this would be when a student writes an instructional objective for each of Bloom's taxonomy. The fourth level is analysis. This is where a student distinguishes, classifies, and relates the assumptions, hypotheses, evidence, or structure of a statement or question. An example of this would be when a student compares and contrasts the conjugative and effective domains of Bloom's taxonomy. The fifth level is synthesis. This is when a student originates, integrates, and combines ideas into a product, plan, or proposal that is new to him or her. An example would be when a student designs a classification scheme for writing educational objectives that combine the conjugative, affective, and psychomotor domains. The sixth and final level is evaluation. This is where a student appraises, assesses, or critiques on a basis of specific standards and criteria. An example would be when a student judges the effectiveness of writing objectives using Bloom's taxonomy. Now, to bring all this information up to today's standards, Lonnie Arison, who, by the way, was a student of Bloom's, along with a new group of conjugative psychologists, updated Bloom's taxonomy to give it more of a 21st century style. In doing this, they draw the attention away from the somewhat static notion of educational objectives, like in Bloom's original work, and points to a more dynamic concept of classification. How they did this was by changing up the words of the letters from nouns to verbs, giving them a sense of action that helped to describe the conjugative process by which thinkers encounter and how they work with knowledge, which you can see on page 1 of the handout titled New Version. They also added a separate taxonomy to the knowledge, the first level of the 6 conjugative processes, getting in a new dimension to help break it down even further. The first of this new taxonomy is knowledge, is factual knowledge, like using terminology, elements, and components. The second is conceptual knowledge, which is using categories, principles, and theories. The third is perpetual knowledge, which is using specific skills and techniques and use of criteria. Finally, we have the fourth edition, which is metacognition. This is the general knowledge or self-knowledge someone possesses. Now we know about what Bloom's taxonomy is about, but how on earth does this relate to learning, and why should I use it in my class? Well, think of it this way. Before we can understand a concept, we have to remember it. Before we can apply the concept, we must understand it. Before we analyze it, we must be able to apply it. Before we can evaluate its impact, we must have analyzed it. Before we can create, we must have remembered, understood, applied, analyzed, and evaluated. Knowing this, we can go back up to the second part of my question and I just asked, and that is, why should I use it in my class? Well, here are a few reasons why. It helps to establish objectives or learning goals that are important to establishing an academic exchange so that teachers and students alike understand the purpose of that exchange. Teachers can benefit from using frameworks to organize objectives because organizing objectives helps to clarify objectives for themselves and for students. Having an organized set of objectives helps teachers to plan and deliver appropriate instruction, design valid assessment tasks and strategies, and ensure that instruction and assessment are aligned with the objectives. To sum this all up, we're going to play a game utilizing Bloom's taxonomy, using the information that you were just presented along with the handouts. Let's just see how you can do with this.
created using Powtoon.